We have with us today Daren Thayne, the CTO of Domo, and a good friend of mine. Um, our topic today is you don't have to be a rocket scientist to be successful. Now, with this, we're doing this in conjunction with my newsletter and perhaps a podcast in the future. And the newsletter is called The Worth and Soul of Words. And typically we focus on the written word, but I want to expand out to the spoken word too. Probably several years back, I remember sitting in a small group of youth with Daren, and he talked about his journey from being a rocket scientist to other vocations and to becoming the CTO of a major technology company. So with that in mind, let's just jump right into the questions. Daren, you literally were, well, in my mind, you were a rocket scientist at one time. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So from an early age, I thought I had my career kind of mapped out very young. My father was he did electrical engineering program. And my older brother, he was 7 years older than me. He chose mechanical engineering. I grew up loving aerospace. I had pictures of jet aircraft on my wall, including my favorite one was the SR-71, that iconic picture of that on my wall. So I thought I always knew from early on, yeah, I'm going to do engineering. And I jumped into that program in my college and got that degree, and actually did get one of the offers that I considered when I graduated was Morton Thiokol, a job working on the shuttle boosters as an engineer. I chose my first job instead to be aerospace engineering, working on jet engines, gas turbine engines. And I thought, wow, this is what I always knew I was going to do. But then, what I found is that what I really loved doing is, my day job was doing analysis for a jet engine. So I was doing this thermal analysis, which was trying to predict what all the temperatures would be inside of this jet engine based on different operating criteria. And so I built this whole model, kind of like predicting the weather, but predicting the weather inside of a jet engine, right, was what I was doing. And what I found is that I would see better ways of doing that thermal analysis job where I could write software that would make it more effective. And so I'd be trying to do the thermal analysis in my day job, and then at nighttime I would think, hey, if I wrote this tool, I could make it so I wouldn't have to manually do this part of it. And so that ended up spending more and more of my thought process was I love that idea of how creative I could be with software to develop solutions that would, make things better, optimize things around me. So it was interesting in those 2 years that I was an aerospace engineer, how I thought I knew for so long in my life growing up that I was going to be this engineer, to figuring out that what I really enjoyed doing is that very creative process of writing software to solve solutions. So that, my first career as an aerospace engineer lasted a couple of years.
Awesome. So you did that, and you talked a little bit about, how while you were doing that, you kind of found a different niche that you really loved. Talk a little bit about that journey of okay, I'm going to move from aerospace to software.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. So that, I had to take programming classes in my engineering program. So I learned to program when I was in junior high. My father, fortunately, he bought early on in the personal computer era. He bought us our family a computer, and so I early on, kind of as a hobbyist, was learning to write code. So as I figured out as an aerospace engineer that what I really liked doing was like writing software. Doing the thermal analysis was one thing, or I did high cycle fatigue analysis also, and as part of my job. And that was interesting and one thing, but I really enjoyed the software. So then I started to think, how can I pivot my career that way? And what I decided to do is I decided to pursue an MBA at that point. So I looked and I thought about the career of product management in the software industry, and thought about what would help me to get my foot in the door to, instead of being an aerospace engineer, to go and be do a product management and be in kind of software leadership. And at the time, the top software companies back then were, Microsoft was one of them, but there was Ashton Tate, Lotus 123. WordPerfect was one of those, also one of those kind of top 10 software companies. So I quit my job as a full-time aerospace engineer. I had one daughter, and my wife was pregnant with our second child when I quit that job. And I applied to business schools and decided to do the MBA program, full-time MBA program at BYU. So we loaded up the moving van from Phoenix, and suddenly my income went to zero. And off we journeyed back to Utah to do the MBA program. So that's kind of how I started my journey towards this career in software. And I was able to get an internship between my first and second year of business school. And I was fortunate. I got an internship at Pepsi Cola in New York, and I ended up also being able to write software there. So, and it just kind of, my skills and ability to write software, it was an MBA internship, so it wasn't really going to be this software internship, but I was able to pivot it into, I was writing more software there. We drove all the way across the country now we had two daughters, and drove all the way from Utah to New York. I worked there in the summer. And then at the end of the summer, I had been involved in this team that was trying to produce a new way for the brand managers at Pepsi to be able to leverage the data that they had. And it was called supermarket scanner data. And this was data they would purchase every week from all the soft drinks sold in the country. They would purchase this data. And so they could see the competitors' products, they could see the Pepsi products. And it was a lot of data for the time, and they didn't have an effective way to use it. So I was on this team as an intern, and turned out I ended up getting very involved in writing the software that would produce this ability for brand managers to analyze the data. And I got so involved in it that by the time I finished my summer internship and was ready to go back to do my second year of business school, Pepsi tried to convince me to not do that, to stay on and continue working on this, and that they would pay for me to finish my business program, somewhere there on the East Coast. And I didn't want to do that. So I said, hey, well, I can just keep working from Utah. I'll just be a contractor. To my surprise, they readily agreed to that. And so I came back to my second year of business school. I worked for Pepsi, continued to work for Pepsi the entire year. And they thought I was going to then continue on with Pepsi after I graduated, but I ended up choosing to go to WordPerfect instead. So I ended my MBA and landed, exactly in the software industry, which is what I had set out to do.
That's awesome. Now, I know you didn't become a CTO at WordPerfect probably right away. And I know you, before Domo, you were, a CTO at a number of other companies. Maybe just rattle off, some of the titles that you went through, that progression.
Yeah. So I started out at WordPerfect. My first job at WordPerfect was writing software on one of the teams. I then was promoted to manage a team. Went through a few different levels of that. I was getting ready to leave WordPerfect, and actually told my boss that I was going to take another job. And he said, he tried to get me to stop that. And he said, I was just getting ready to ask you to take on a new role, which was to lead Quattro Pro. So Novell at that time had purchased WordPerfect, and then they purchased Quattro Pro from Borland to create this WordPerfect suite. And the Borland team, the Culture Pro team, was in Scotts Valley, California, and they all jointly made a deal with Oracle, and so they all resigned on the same day. So I was asked to go take that over, all of Cultural Pro. So that was an interesting phase in my career, and so I had to build a new team, pick that over, and then because of that success, Pharrell promoted me to be over all of the WordPerfect suite of products. And so that was the last thing I did when I left WordPerfect, is I was over the whole WordPerfect suite. And then I essentially I took a job. So I left. That was a pretty big job. All of the software engineering teams for the various applications that made up the WordPerfect suite, they're all reported to me. And I had this opportunity come with a company called Open Market, which was, and it was a team of only 6 engineers that I would be over. And I went and interviewed with them. I was intrigued, but it seemed like, wow, I'm here at WordPerfect. I've got this big job, 140, 150 engineers throughout all my organization. And also this new job with Open Market was a substantially lower salary, like pretty significant dip in salary. So it didn't seem like, you often hear people say, don't ever take a step down in your career. Like your resume will suffer if you show a step down. Boy, I struggled and struggled. And it was interesting how the anxiety that built up in me of trying to decide, should I take this step into the unknown, kind of, right? And do this much smaller job. It's actually surprising how much anxiety that can produce in your life. And I had 2 thoughts. One of them, as I was really struggling with that, I had this time when I started to kind of feel a little bit like, woe is me. It was a little weird, like, because it was so much stress trying to decide, do I take this or do I continue with this? And I remember getting this distinct impression of kind of getting, how dare you think, woe is me? Because what you have here are 2 great opportunities. and that was a little bit of a humbling thing to realize that, yeah, I shouldn't be so stressed out about having 2 good opportunities. But anyway, I ended up taking that much smaller job, and that ended up being the best decision of my life, because I went into a new area. It was all about internet development, web development, and the year I spent there was the reason why I was able to become the CTO at Ancestry. And that was a great part of my career. Is for almost 9 years I was the CTO at Ancestry, and that's how I met the founder of Omniture, and then who became the founder of Domo. That's how the connection. I ended up being at Domo now. I've been at Domo 13 years now. So
I remember before you took the job at Domo, you were with another company,
yeah,
and I remember us talking. What do you think you're going to do next? And there was a lot of uncertainty. Should you retire? Should you look for something else?
yeah.
And I knew that probably caused you some anxiety too. Tell me what it was about Domo that decided, yeah, this is a good fit for me.
Yeah. So, if I go way back to that job at Pepsi Cola, that was my first foray into data and analytics, because again, they were buying all this data from the supermarket, Nielsen scanner data, and trying to figure out how to leverage that data. And that really put a bug in me of this fascination with data mining, data exploring, insights from data. And I had that ever since. At Ancestry, as the CTO, I ended up getting very involved in the analytics of looking at how Ancestry would acquire new visitors to the site, and which campaigns worked and which ones didn't, and doing A/B testing and deciding, which one's going to win. And so I got very involved I became this data junkie. And so, and then the founder of Omniture, that was a data company, right? And as I got involved with Omniture, and Omniture Ancestry became an Omniture customer, again, it was just right, data analytics, and how to use data analytics to to gain insights and drive a company. So when Josh James approached me and sort of describing what he wanted to do with this next company that became Domo, definitely spoke to me and what I love. And I've definitely found, and I've advised a lot of people over my career that if you choose a career that aligns with something that you are good at, then you're much more likely to enjoy your work if you're good at it. And then you're much more likely to also stand out and be one of the higher performers. Versus if you pick a career that you picked because I've known people who picked the career because they thought, well, this will be a career that'll make me a good living, so I'm going to pick this career. But if it doesn't align with your strengths and your interests, then you're always going to be, it's going to be a struggle. I think that enjoying what you do should be the top priority. And of course, you also need to figure out how to make a living at it. But if what you enjoy doing is chasing butterflies, probably you shouldn't pick that. Because I don't know how you can make any money doing that. Maybe a few people can, but but yeah. And the strengths thing is a fascinating topic. I think I'll take a little diversion down the strengths path. My son was struggling trying to figure out what to major in college. And I happened to be talking to a friend of mine who he was working at Gallup. And he was I think he was a senior vice president at Gallup. And he said to me, oh, yes, strengths studies show that so many people choose their career not based on their strengths. And they instead choose it based on, what my parents did or what my uncle did. Or he mentioned some people will say, well, they served a mission, an LDS mission, and they'd say my mission president was this, and that inspired them to choose that career. And one of the things that Gallup had was this thing called Strengths Finder. It was Clifton Strengths Finder. From the author was Clifton. And my friend Paul was a big believer in this concept of strengths. And so he said, have your son take the Strengths Finder assessment, and then I'll coach him on people with these strengths tend to have higher career satisfaction in these kinds of jobs, which to me is like a fascinating thing to know, right? So I took the Strengths Finder test. My wife took it and my son took it. We all three took it. And there's a way in the Strengths Finder test that you can share your results with each other. So from this, iPhone app, I could go and look at my strengths, and I could go to the top and switch it and look at my wife's, and then I could look at my son's. And so then we went to breakfast with Paul to have him coach my son on his strengths. And he said, and by the way, my wife was looking at my top strengths, and she said, yeah, I think they nailed it for you. And she made a comment, wow, I wish I would have known this about you, 20 years ago, because that just would have helped me, right? Like,
Yeah.
we all come at relationships maybe defaulting to thinking that people around us think the same way we do, and they're going to interpret signals the same way we do, which is not at all true. And so it took her a long time to learn these things about me. And therefore, oh, that's why he responded that way, because, he's wired this way, right? Versus like if she could have known this ahead of time, she said. So anyway, we're sitting there at breakfast, and Paul says to my son, wow, you've got this, as your number 6 strength, you've got woo, which is WOO, which means winning others over. And he says to my son, well, it's interesting that you have woo as your number 6 strength. And so then I look at the app and I said, oh, I've got also woo as my number 6. And then I click on woo and I start reading the paragraph of what it means. And instantly I'm aghast. I'm thinking, oh, when I read what woo says, that's so much not me, right? It says that people with woo love winning others over, love to meet new people and learn about them and win them over. And they're very, all this, and I'm an introvert, and I don't like to me, it's a lot of energy it takes for me to meet new people. It drains my energy, and I'll do it, but it's hard on me, right? And so I started thinking, oh wow, this whole assessment is inaccurate, because if it thinks woo is me, it failed. And so I was becoming very disappointed in the whole process. And then I realized at the top of my phone, I had my son's checked. So I was looking at his. That's why I said, oh, mine's 6 also. So then I quickly I switched it to mine. I started looking for woo. And I went, that's funny that Zoom thinks I did a thumbs up there. And I went all the way down, and it turns out that woo, there's 34 strengths in your Clifton Strengths report. Woo is number 34 on mine. And so it renewed my confidence in the assessment. And I would also say it got it right about my son, because growing up as a kid, right? I had 5 kids, and we'd always go to this restaurant. It was our favorite restaurant. And we'd often go there, 2 or 3 times a month. We'd go there as a family. And every time we go to a restaurant, my son, Josh, he would see the name tag of the person that's taken our names or the server, right? That would come to the table. He'd look at her name, and then he would speak to her using her name. He would talk to her like he knew her. And I would always see that, and I would think, why are you doing that, Josh? You don't know her. Like, why do you talk to her like you know her? You just addressed her by her name. You don't know who her. It just seems so weird to me that he would do that. Well, he does that, right? It's one of his strengths. He does have woo, right? And so I think the Clifton Strengths Finder identified that correctly in him, and it identified it correctly in me. It's 34 for me. It's 6 for him. Anyway, that concept of figuring out what your strengths are, and then trying to go with your strengths. I'm a big believer in that. And as opposed to looking at my weaknesses and saying, okay, I'm going to figure out how to make my weaknesses strengths. I don't think that's a fruitful use of my time.
That's awesome. I want to kind of shift gears a little bit. I know you're a religious person and a family man. How do you find life balance between career, religion, and family?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think everybody's heard the anecdote of like something like people on their deathbed never will say, "Oh, I wish I'd spent more time at work." Right? We've heard something like that stated, right? Well, I don't have to wait for my deathbed to already know that if I could do it all over again, I would spend less time at work. I would say that for sure. And I tell people that work for me that all the time. I will remind them, life is going to go by so fast. So don't make the mistake of sacrificing too much of like your kids. I have a granddaughter who's 9 years old, and I was just visiting with them. They live in Colorado Springs. And I was reminding my daughter, you've only got 8 or 9 more years, and she's going to be probably out of the house. It goes by so fast, right? It goes by so fast. And I told her, I said, you're going to blink and it's going to be done. So I do tell people often in my teams, I'll say, hey, you got to have the right balance, because you will regret it if you don't pay attention to that. And the other thing I've done, so that I've had very stressful situations in my job. And I sometimes will tell people that when you're the chief technology officer of a company that's their whole product is technology, like Ancestry was, right? The whole product was technology. Domo's product is all technology. So when you're the chief technology officer, it's like you're in front of the freight train all the time. And I've described it as, I have a bleeding esophagus job. And I describe it that way because I actually was in the hospital several years ago with a bleeding esophagus. And the doctor there said, he told me and my wife, he said, he did a scope, looked at my throat. He said, I know in my career, I've never seen anybody with as bad as bleeding esophagus as you have. so I have a bleeding esophagus career. But when one time at my job, we had a really stressful situation. Well, Ancestry had a really stressful situation where we almost couldn't make payroll. But later I had a situation where there was a real potential that our company was going to get completely shut down. And we had to do a tremendous amount of new software changes to have that not happen. And I remember being at the office for 54 hours straight one time. 54 hours I was at the office. And one of the leaders on my team, he came to me and he was breaking down. He was, emotionally just full of anxiety and was like on a breakdown, after a breakdown. And I stopped him and I said, wait, okay. One of the things you got to learn is you got to learn how to take all this stress and the challenges that we're experiencing right now with this company. And you got to be able to put it in the proper size box, because yeah, we might go out of business tomorrow, but I gotta ask you, will you be okay? And then I said this, I said, it's not like one of your kids has cancer, right? That's not the kind of problem we're dealing with here. This is just a job. This is just this company. And yeah, it's stressful, but you better learn to put it in the right size box. Okay. Because it's not, it's not on the scale of important things in your life. You got to put it in the right size box. So
with that in mind, what advice do you have to people to help them find, and not just career people, but other people? How do we find life balance?
yeah. I think part of it is understanding all the demands you have on your time, and being able to figure out which box they belong in, and really kind of figure out remind yourself over and over again, really what am I after in life? And sometimes I think about, I'll remind myself that I think really what I'm after is joy. I think that's what I'm after. I want to live a joyful life. And then I start thinking about, well, what are the things that are going to help me achieve a joyful life? And some of them are financial security, at least. Some of them do come across to me as I do need to feel some sense of security financially that will help me live a joyful life. But beyond that, so much of my joy does not come from my relationships and accomplishments at work. They do, and I've learned even more and more. I have 14 grandchildren now. I have one more on the way, so 15 before this year is done. Hopefully we'll have. And that is for sure for me, the derivation of joy. So much more comes from my family than it does from my career. And I think to myself, do you ever wonder, like, I love I value going to funerals, and I always come away inspired, I would say, from funerals. I do, almost always. I've had one that I didn't, but and then I think to myself, how will I be remembered at a funeral? Have you ever had that thought? How will I be remembered? And I hope it's not. I don't want somebody to stand up at my funeral and talk about, wow, Daren was a great CTO. I don't want that. That's not what I hope. That's not what I hope people remember about me. I don't want that on my gravestone, right? Like none of that. So that's another way to think about how should I prioritize my life? And it's easy to prioritize it on things that don't really bring joy, but I am after joy. I need to remind myself of it. And it's not easy. It's not easy. That balance is not easy.
I just have a few more questions, but I just thought of another question, though, before I asked the last two. And this is a question I hadn't planned on asking you. I know you work hard, but I also know you play really hard.
Yeah, I do.
And
Yes.
I don't know if you still wakeboard, but
Yeah, we still
tell
do.
me what playing hard does to help you find that success, or that life success for
Yeah.
your, sounds like it's joy or
Yeah.
balance.
Well, I
Tell
would
me
say,
about that.
yeah, and I believe that we have a pretty close-knit family. And my 5 children so far, they're all married. They're all, in their careers. They've all graduated from college. And I feel like, so far so far they've got fairly good balance in their lives. And when I think about that journey of raising a family and all the other demands that are on our time, I do put quite a bit of value in this aspect of we did do a lot of vacations. And I remember neighbors telling me, wow. I remember one neighbor in particular I was thinking of, and I'm not going to say who it was, but they would say, wow, you guys always go on vacation. And then this neighbor said, I wish we had that much money, or something like that. She had tied it to money. And my immediate response was, in my head, was, no, it's not that. It's that we prioritized it. Because the reason I know it's not money is because my parents did the same thing. And my father, we were always on the lower end of means. We had 7 children. My father was a steel worker, and he actually worked 2 jobs. He did a night job working as an electrician for several cities. And so we were, we never had a new car growing up. We all, we were always kind of hanging in there. But my parents prioritized vacations, family vacations. So my wife and I did also, Sharice and I, and we would do about 4 vacations a year. And many of our neighbors were astonished at that. but I do believe in this, that the statement that a family that plays together stays together is one way of putting it. But spending meaningful time together, doing things that we enjoy. So that's been our tradition. We've always done it. I'm a big believer in it.
And I don't know all the vacations you do, but I know at least one of them, you schedule that every summer,
Yeah.
and all your kids put that on their date
There's
book.
actually 2 of them we do every summer. Yes.
2 of them every summer.
2.
Okay.
Yep.
And, so I
Yep.
think that's key is, you make it a priority, you schedule it, and
Yeah.
one knows, and they're there, and, and that just brings your family together.
Yeah, it is. And, it's interesting. There's also a thing about tradition that I think maybe we undervalue just the mere tradition aspect of some things. One year I was sitting at dinner, and we had done family vacations to Hawaii. We had done them to Cancun area a few times and gone to the all-inclusive resorts in Cancun, and which I thought was very appealing, because we could just get on a plane, fly to Cancun, and then, it's all inclusive, so you don't have to worry about anything the whole week. And so we'd done various vacations like that. But every year, without a single break, we have gone to Lake Powell every year since I've done it since I was about 14 years old, every year. And that's a lot of work, that trip. And so, all of the packing and all of the transporting the boat, and then getting on the houseboat and finding a place to dock the houseboat. It's a lot of work for me. So one day we were sitting at the dinner table, and I asked my kids, I was thinking to myself, wow, Cancun was so great. Or, that Hawaii trip was so great. And so I just asked, I said, so what's the favorite vacation that we've done? And I expected them to kind of chirp in on different aspects of these. And it was almost like they hadn't planned it, but it felt like they all planned it, because all 5 of them said Lake Powell. They all agreed, Lake Powell. I didn't expect that, because to me, Lake Powell was just the thing we do every year. It wasn't, it was seemed more mundane than going to Cancun or going to Hawaii. But that's their favorite vacation. And
Well, and as
they've
you
all done it
talk,
since they were babies.
yeah, and as you talk about that, it makes me think of, with that kind of vacation, they're stuck together,
Yes. Yes.
and so it is kind of like this crucible of, hey, we're going to be together this week.
Yeah.
You enjoy each other's company.
Yeah.
You draw closer and you develop relationships that maybe you wouldn't on these other more extravagant vacations where people go their different directions.
I agree. It's also, by the way, it reminds me of, I've often said that that's one thing great about skiing also. When you go skiing with your teenage children or your younger children, you have a pretty long lift ride with them, right? And you get you have a captive audience there on that chairlift. And so we taught all of our kids to ski when they were young and did skiing with them every year too. And that's a good one to have time to actually talk to your kids is, you're on that ski lift. So
Just two last questions. And you kind of answered this next one, but what does success mean to you?
yeah, it is definitely my family relationships, that I value those relationships. I value the joy that I get from them, and at times I remember also thinking as a parent that once my children reach certain milestones, either, graduated from college and got married and things like that, I almost felt like I could spike the football in the end zone and be like, I'm done, I did it. But I realized, and all of us who have adult children realize that that's folly to think that. In some ways, it only gets more complicated as a parent with adult children. And so I have had some challenging situations that have caused me some stress and pain that even more brings to my heart how much I value my family and my relationships with my family, my children, my grandchildren, and that joy. That's success for me. That is success.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other insights you'd like to share?
No, I don't think
Okay.
I think I've said it. I think I've said enough.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for spending time with me today. This has been a great chat. Thanks so much.